Hello, I am Brandon, the humble host of Actual Play Broadcast. This will serve as an introduction to our broadcast for the time being. As we record and publish more, it shall change. We are still getting things set up, so apologies for any errors, skips, or silence that may occur. Everything will be smoothed out in due time. Please enjoy our broadcasts of various RPGs, and remember to tune in for more every week, as continuations or new adventures will be posted at such times. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Actual Play Broadcast. Today, we are reviewing Curseborne.
Yes.
We recently wrapped up our short playthrough ran by Zemian. And going down the list, we'll introduce everybody and their characters. I'm Brandon. I played Tyler.
I'm Sindra. I played Raven Ellis.
I'm Damiani. I played Dan Coleman. I forgot how to read there for a moment.
Zemian, who played the hash slinging slasher.
The slash singing clash, the bash binging bat.
The mash fligging.
But yes, I played the maniac with the chainsaw and all of the NPCs.
So if you're unfamiliar with us doing reviews, we are going to talk about the game. We are going to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, our thoughts on it, and overall our experience.
Boy, howdy, do I have thoughts.
I hope so.
Full disclosure, we did say so at the beginning of this when we did the actual play. But in case you are somebody who is just jumping straight to the review because you don't care about the actual play, you just want to hear people's thoughts, we were playing off of the manuscript, the pre-compiled manuscript, which I think came out either just before our last session or just after. I can't recall, but I believe the compiled manuscript is out now. So what that means, if you're not familiar, the way Onyx Path does things to help guide the conversation when they're doing their Kickstarter backer kit or whatever, they release the manuscript in parts. So instead of giving everybody the whole document all at once, people will get a part of it and then give their feedback on that part. And then they will release the next part, so on and so forth, until the entire thing is out over the course of the month that the funding is going on. So we were playing out of not all 9 portions of the PDF, but I think everybody, when they were making characters, probably had 3 or 4 PDFs open at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was a little awkward.
Yeah, once it's all one book, I assume it'll be much easier.
Yeah, and I'm hoping there will be, because that's the other thing is, obviously, it's a draft manuscript. So while some things may have been a little confusing when we were making characters, it's going to be safe to assume a lot of that stuff is going to be addressed, because we were not the only people confused. There were lots of questions that were being asked in the official channels on the official Discord. So, but just so you as the listeners are aware, we were playing out of that draft manuscript. So it's not the end product. It is complete. It is rules complete, meaning anything that changes is mostly going to be errata, FAQ, balance changes, rewording, so on and so forth. The mechanics, as they were as we played them, are done outside of edits and adjustments.
Yeah.
So the game we played, by and large, is the game you're going to get. So
And
I'm cool with doing a review because it's going to be what we get. Yeah, like this isn't a half-baked, it could be totally different in a year's time. No. this is it. This is Curseborne.
But yeah, later in the review, if we talk about some like balance thing that we thought was bad and it doesn't exist in the version of the game that you're playing right now, don't get mad at us for being stupid and missing it or something. It might not have been like that at the time we played.
That said, if any of these three complain about 1-point shockwave being too strong, they're just salty and should be dismissed.
We still won.
The only thing that I question is whether or not the shockwave like allowed him to move to us. That's the only thing. Didn't bother me. I was in melee. I was fine with him moving to me.
It just called for within close range.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, like 1-point shockwave felt a little weird, just like thematically, but otherwise seemed fine.
It was it's normally 2 points, right? He just had a feature that discounted it. Oh, okay.
Yes.
It seems
like and also that was like his gimmick.
Yeah. I assume it's mostly supposed to be for like an AOV, but
I
it was flavored differently.
I believe the quality. Actually, I have it written down here. One moment, I can pull up what the quality is called.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, I do think the you can't dodge or soak this is a little weird, but I think that cuts down on toxic or
trample. So you can dodge it technically, so kind of, sort of. You can't respond to getting hit by a shockwave with a defense test, from what I understand. But if your defense has already been buffed from like a as part of like the round or whatever, he still needs to have enough successes to actually hit you.
Yeah, I think
that's
the way
the way the combat went down though is none of you were ever really in a situation where your defense was high enough and he didn't have enough successes to not shockwave you if he was within range.
Yeah,
it just never played out that way.
He got us good with shockwave like every time he felt like it.
So the ability he had was called Trample.
Mm-hmm.
It can be used at short or close range.
Oh, so his was bigger too.
Yes.
It just never came up because we were all kind of clustered because indoors.
Yeah. But joking aside about non-existent salt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So first time actually having a proper Story Path Ultra system on the pod. I've been cooking. They know. It's been mentioned in a few other reviews and other things we've done with side comments and stuff. If you're a regular listener, you've probably picked up on it. But I've been cooking on Story Path for a while. Haven't had a lot of chance to do anything with it yet because plans are in motion. But we're about to go on a string of Story Path Ultra and related games. But first time...
Except for whatever nonsense I do.
Yeah. That said, first time Story Path Ultra on the pod. It was definitely, I think I would say for all of us, a learning experience.
Yeah.
Both familiar and kind of different.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I just want to be upfront with that. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Making characters was cool. Like, it doesn't do anything super special for making the characters, but something that, like, for the past 2 Story Path characters I've made, well, Onyx Path Publishing characters I've made, they always have a way to make it interesting. Like, for the Trinity Continuum line, you choose an approach, which just, hey, you get to add a dot to a row.
Yeah.
And just make that, be better at that. And it's just like, hey, this is how you are as a person. You're like forceful, you're trying to get around things, you just tough it out.
Mm-hmm.
This one, where you pick 2 separate lineages, I think is really neat. Where, well, not 2 separate lineages, but you have a lineage and a family.
The lineage, family, and path are...
Yeah. I thought that was fun to go down, because you can also say, well, which one is more important to me, my lineage or my family?
Yeah. I kind of am inclined to agree.
And then you get something from it. So
it's very reminiscent to those that are familiar with the old White Wolf World of Darkness games. Very reminiscent of the idea of having kind of 3 or so core elements of identifying who your character is, really. It wasn't as strong in the old World of Darkness stuff, but in Chronicles of Darkness, they leaned into that a lot more, where you had, for example, in Vampire the Requiem, you had your bloodline, you had I believe in Requiem they still called it sect, but the political organization you were a part of, essentially. And I can't remember what the third part was. Maybe it was Generation or something like that. Or no, they didn't have Generation. I can't remember. But having these kind of handful of core elements that come together, and then you have room to customize. Obviously, with Story Path, it was the path system. With Curseborne, we had lineage, family, and I believe role is what the third one was.
I think it was called. Yeah, it was like basically your role as who you are in the group, like narratively.
Yeah, like are you something like a doctor, or are you, well, I want to say wizard, but I feel like that's cheating. If your lineage and your family are already flavors of sorcerer.
Yeah, I'm a wizard.
Yeah, it's that easy.
I mean, I was a monster hunter.
And all of the Story Path Ultra games are built off of this. I personally, I didn't get to make a character, obviously, but I was kind of hit or miss on having both lineage and family as paths. I would almost have preferred. Well, yeah, we're like this far into the review and we haven't even clarified. So, in case you don't know, and you're like, "What is Curseborne?" Curseborne is urban fantasy, kind of sort of horror. We'll touch on that a little bit when we go to talk about the setting. But if you're familiar with World of Darkness or Chronicles of Darkness, you're kind of in the same vein. There are some tonal differences according to the base setting, but like I said, we'll get into that later. You play as an accursed. There are, I believe, 7 different lineages. Or is it families? I constantly reverse them in my head. But there's 7 major groups.
Yeah, you have lineage and then family. Family is your specific subsect of that lineage.
Okay. So you've got 7 lineages, and each lineage is a general type of supernatural. For example, primals are a big catch-all for shapeshifters, essentially. Then you get into the families, and you have Brandon's character Tyler, who is a Get of Lyca, essentially a werewolf. And so each lineage has, I want to say, at least 6 families or something to that effect. There's a lot of options. And I understand what they were going with by saying you have a lineage and a family path, but it almost felt kind of redundant to me, because if you're part of that family, you're part of that lineage. And I know with Story Path Ultra, if you played Trinity Continuum before, the path system's a little bit different in Ultra. You make selections for what are your minor paths and your major paths. And your major path gives you more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a major path because, for whatever reason, it's a higher priority to your character. Maybe your character is more invested in whatever that is, or maybe they've just spent more time being involved in whatever that path is. However you want to rationalize it, that path means more to your character, and that's why you select it as a major path, so you get more for it. That's all fine and dandy.
Sorry.
My issue with having lineage as a path here is there is, from what I've seen and what I've read, very little greater lineage community or culture for the most part. That is hard to find. Could you fill in the gaps yourself? Sure. But it seemed weird to have lineage as a major path or a path in and of itself when there's not a lot being like, and yeah, all the shapeshifters got together and did shapeshifter things.
Yeah.
There's not
It's true.
really any precedent for it in the fluff.
But we'll get to that.
You can. So yeah, and this also ties in with my other thing about the setting where we could have had some kind of paths around like a political grouping or factional grouping or however you want to call it. But we don't have these.
No.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But
and
it's something that stuck out to me for character creation because even in Trinity Continuum, you have society paths. And we don't have those in this.
I think as a solution for that, I would prefer that stuff to just be expanded upon rather than the lineage as a path being like the top thing. Because I think it kind of needs expanding on anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed I'm a simple man. So like what I was offered I was like perfectly fine with. Now, I'm never going to say no to more options.
Yeah.
And like overall just like playing my experience with the White Wolf, well, I have next to no experience with White Wolf. Chronicles of Darkness, I have a little bit of experience, but it wasn't the greatest experience.
Oh, no, it wasn't. You were done dirty.
Chronicles of Darkness Skittles game.
I thought Chronicles was like
it wasn't
more favorable.
Chronicles is better as Skittles, but I think his specific thing was bad.
From what Brandon has told me of that story, this Skittles wasn't the actual problem. It was how it was being ran and everything was being handled. That was the problem. Because there was... And, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but it sounds like there was a lot of just bullshit going on with the table at a player level.
There's a lot of just bullshit going on.
I mean, you've told me the story, but it's been a long time. But considering who I think you were playing with, I believe it.
One day we will record an RPG horror stories episode.
I don't even count that as a horror story.
That's sad.
I kind of do because it's left an opinion upon you.
No,
it's sort of horror story in that it ruined a system for you.
It didn't ruin a system for me. It's just thinking about the system doesn't leave me with the fondest memories.
Yeah, it's tainted you.
It has.
I gotta give you good memories with Chronicles.
Anyways,
but for Curseborne, like the setting itself interests me for what I will call its mirrorverse for like White Wolf and Chronicles. So I was interested in the setting, played a little bit of play-by-post here and there, and I was just like, sure, I'll jump in. We did a little quiz thing. It's just like, oh, you should play this, and I was just like,
interesting.
I think the quiz was interesting too. I did not take the quiz's opinion. I just was like, I want to play a werewolf. We're gonna play a werewolf.
Yeah,
I didn't see there.
Yeah, Damiani, the only one to play what was recommended to him. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I looked at everything, and I just kind of ended up with Chimera anyway, just because it ended up being the most interesting.
Yeah, they're neat.
Chimera looks hella fun, actually.
Yeah, Chimera ended up being the correct choice. Sorry, not sorry.
I disagree on a character level.
I'm actually sorry that I didn't react to that very much. I didn't know until after the first session that like Chimera have like a supernatural aura sort of around them.
Oh, it's
Like,
not the
people, like-
aura. It's that like so the whole thing about outsiders is that like they try to please humanity a lot. They like go out of their way to be very agreeable. And then
Yeah.
Chimera's thing is that they are fucking weird. They make everyone uncomfortable, not because they're supernatural, but because they're fucking weird.
Yeah. Well, like mechanically, like their thing is that they make people uncomfortable, and I didn't know that going into the first session, so I didn't really play up any reactions to it. And I think I kind of forgot later on, but we were also dealing with other stuff by then, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fucking actual horror movie.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
but all in all, like how it felt to play the game, I thought it was a lot of fun. Story path hits a lot of good boxes for me on playing. It's simple with a good amount of depth, and you don't have to sit there and write a thesis to make a character.
It's true.
Yeah, I like writing theses to make characters, but it is also nice to have to all the time.
It's a good kind of chewy system because there's a lot of options. There's a lot of customization. You can make choices that matter and such, but the mechanics never become obscenely complicated. The only mechanic we eschewed during our play is the contacts for reaching out to your connections or bonds or whatever to get in contact with somebody, and I didn't realize there were dedicated rules for that. So middle of session, I'm looking at the rules and they just weren't clicking in my head, and I was like, if this was a full campaign, I'd have worried a little bit more about it, but it was a quick just do what I kind of do when I run Vampire and leave it to a percentage roll to see if they pick up. Dependent on how close they are with you, how reliable they are, and what their schedule is like. Because if you try to call a normie at 2 a.m. as a vampire, they're probably not going to pick up the phone.
Is that not normal?
What's the twist?
But yeah, the rules are solid. I think they're reducing how much advantage comes up is a choice, which if you're not familiar, advantage is the renamed, reworded version of scale from Trinity Continuum, which is a really awesome mechanic, actually. It's really good at emphasizing the difference between things.
Yeah.
Instead of D&Ds or similar just RPGs in general, instead of just saying apply more number to the thing, it's you compare scales between things if you are dealing with scale. And so say you have somebody who can move super fast, or maybe that's not a great example. Say you have somebody who's super strong. They're like power advantage 3. They compare it to the durability of a wall, and the wall's durability scales like 1 because it's a shittily made
It's
wall.
like drywall or something.
Yeah. They'll get extra enhancement on the roll, +2 enhancement per difference. So they'll get +4 in our example here. And that enhancement counts as extra hits on their roll so long as they roll hits on the test. It enhances how many hits they have.
And scale is I think strength is actually probably the easiest. Well, strength and like durability, are probably the easiest ones to explain, since you can kind of imagine it being like, all right, if I'm scale 3, whatever the example of scale 3 for power is, I think it's like a gun or something. A gun might be 2. It might be like a car
most guns are 2.
Yeah, so it's probably like a vehicle hitting something. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, I, as a human-sized being, can like punch as hard as a car hitting somebody despite not being that large and massive because I have like a power that gives me that scale.
Yeah.
Which like could have a similar effect to another power is for like aberrant, just because scale's easy to explain there. It's like I could also just be like, oh, I have a power that makes me as big as a pickup truck, and now I have that power scale because I just am bigger rather than having super strength.
Yeah.
And then like it gets a little more abstract when you're talking about mental attributes and stuff, but it works the same way.
Yep. So Curseborne doesn't engage with advantage as much. There are some spells and abilities that do grant it, though not a lot of it from what I've seen so far. They have talked about, even though there is a really awesome selection for spells and such right now, they have talked about going to what is called higher entanglement, which affects how many curse dice you can have, which is a mechanic that essentially decides how much gas you have in your tank for using your powers.
Yeah.
Because the really strong powers you have to expend curse dice to use. And when you hit 0 curse dice, that's when the bad things happen to you. So,
Well, it also there's a lot of like extra gas in the spells themselves hidden behind high entanglement.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
But we know there is going to be in a future book. We have no idea when it's going to be years away from when this comes out still. But we know that there is going to be higher entanglement play than what's presented in the book. Characters can be fairly strong already. Comparing to other games, they're not going to be crazy bonkers strong by any means. But these are supernatural people that can deal with supernatural threats. They're pretty capable compared to normal people.
Yeah.
But normal people are also still going to be kind of scary to them if those normal people show up in numbers with guns. So,
Yeah, if you don't have a spell that makes you tougher, gun still does gun things to your body.
yeah.
One of my favorite parts about the system actually was like going through the spells and just seeing all the nonsense you could do at base before you started fucking with entanglement. I had something that was like I had entanglement 1 for brutalize, which just made me hit harder. I could do some like weird shenanigans with it. It's just like, instead of it getting additional tags to my weapons like heavy, it was like, yeah, you get a +1 enhancement bonus.
Which is so good.
It's still
Yeah,
good.
+1 doesn't sound like a lot, but in this, I mean, that's an extra hit on your test. So long as you get a hit, now you count as
Yeah.
having 2.
having a reliable extra hit, even if it's not helping you like, it doesn't help you get the base hit to succeed at all, but it might help you get over difficulty, or be able to use other stunts. And just knowing it's there can like do a lot for planning what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody who's played Trinity Continuum, you know how valuable enhancement can be. But if you're somebody who's not familiar at all with these types of games, enhancement is really good. One big change for Story Path Ultra, though, is you are capped on how much enhancement you can have. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the cap is. It might be 10. It might stop there. It might be less than that. I'm not sure. But it is technically capped. There is only so much enhancement you can gain for a roll.
I think it's-
Personally, not so sure if I agree with that as a design choice, but that's also something you can easily come in and if you don't like it, be like, nah, that's not a dramatic change. If they're able to rack up that much extra enhancement, maybe they deserve to have it.
Yeah, dude. Let people specialize.
Let
yeah.
people go nuts.
There are some interesting things with. Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask, was there anything else you guys wanted to cover about playing the game before I talk about running the game?
I was going to say we should probably explain. I don't remember if we talked about it already, but we went into this knowing we were going to be Entanglement 1 and not advancing our characters at all. And, chose things accordingly.
Yeah, I did tell them ahead of time there's going to be some investigation, maybe a little bit of social, but mostly investigation.
Yeah.
And we knew there'd be one battle.
Yeah, there's going to be one fight.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be spicy. So
you
make combat characters, just make sure you can, contribute outside of combat.
Yeah.
I tried. My dice fucking hated me.
That does remind me though. I do like that. It seems like I haven't looked at every single lineage and family and spell, but it kind of seems like, regardless of what kind of character you make, it's pretty hard to not be at least a little bit good at non-combat things. Like you'll probably have at least some kind of feature that helps you outside of combat, which I think is good. Like even if you want to play a combat specialist, it keeps you from being completely out of action when something other than combat is going on.
Well, I think it also should be said between both Trinity Continuum and Story Path Ultra, we have a more condensed skill list, so you're not as we still have the eternal problem of feeling like we don't have enough skill points, but
that happens no matter what.
That's the forever struggle. That's never going to end. But even still, you don't need to have a ton of dots in a skill, and especially when it comes to things like investigation, Story Path Ultra says, hey, you don't need any successes to get one clue when you're doing an investigation. You're not rolling against difficulty 1. You're rolling against difficulty 0 when you're doing any kind of investigation. So it prevents a failure state in the investigation, which I do have personally mixed feelings about that. I'm not saying it's a bad choice or a wrong choice. It's more about my preference and how I like to run things. I do see the appeal in it, and that it's nice, especially for like people like Brandon's character. Even if he fails a roll, he can either make it a dramatic failure and not necessarily get a clue, or maybe he gets what he think is a clue, but it's wrong information or something dramatically appropriate, but he still gets something out of it, even though he failed. So there's something to progress forward with.
Yeah, the story happens regardless. You don't if everyone failed the investigation roll, now the entire game is soft locked because we just have no leads on what to do.
Personally, I already kind of design things to avoid choke points in the story, so I'm generally an ST that doesn't mind, or in this case an SG, story guide.
Yeah.
Where you're not going to get choke pointed because everybody failed the investigation roll at, say, the apartment. There are, in my games, there's always alternative routes. Unless the failure situation is everybody died. Well then, maybe don't do that.
That's a little different.
Yeah.
Restart the campaign, except you can only choose from the dead.
Yeah. So, but that's, once again, that's one of those things where I would say, if you're going to pick this up and you're not sure on where you fall on the fence when it comes to the investigation system in that way, try it out as is first. Get a feel for it. I know there's a lot of people out there who they don't know how to run investigation stuff. And Curseborne does an okay job of laying it out for you on some ideas on how to build an investigation, and just having that mechanic alone where it is just mechanically, here is how you determine people getting clues, can help you out. Generally, good rule of thumb that I was doing was each hit is a question you can ask outside of my set list of clues that I know to give them. Like, here are the clues I planned. Anything beyond that are questions they can ask, because they could very well think of things that I wasn't thinking of, and I can say, absolutely, that makes sense. There's a clue for that, or maybe it is insight they can gather from what information is available that I can spell out for them as their character rationalizing it out.
That makes sense too, narratively, since the question that we ask as the player could also be just the information that the character was specifically trying to find. So they're
Pretty
just
much.
directing your search in that way.
So, since that's kind of bleeding into running things, let's talk about running the game a little bit. Overall, felt pretty good to run it. Didn't really have to do a lot of mechanical prep. The only real mechanical prep I had to do was deciding how I wanted the loophole, or not loophole.
Liminal
Brain.
space.
The
Liminal
liminality.
space. Yeah, the liminality.
Mm.
Figuring out how I wanted that to work. And making the boss enemy, essentially. Making the definitely not Chainsaw Massacre, but Shining Edition.
I thought that's what you're going for.
And it kind of was. Like, I wasn't aiming for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was just like, I really like the locale of The Shining, but I didn't want to explicitly make it a hotel. And I liked the idea of the abandoned, like, ski lodge up in the mountains. I was like, okay, that's like a cool physical space.
The remoteness
And
gives it a lot.
yeah, and then I want it to be a dude that became a monster, essentially. So I was kind of going through my head of horror movie type vibe stuff, and I eventually was just like, it's got to be a chainsaw.
So
It's just got to be.
When you described it as a lodge, the thought that went through my mind was the Ormond Lodge in Dead by Daylight.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I actually thought about, when I was building the character, I thought about Dead by Daylight Hillbilly more than I ever thought about Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. I only made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference and stuff just because I knew it was an older movie than the 90s, and it seemed like a really easy joke to pull to make Brandon's character uncomfortable. I mean, what?
Absolutely.
Your character was also born on the cob.
Yes.
We gotta get out of here. Everything's on the cob.
God.
So building the guy was pretty easy. They have a pretty good list of, like, templates of essentially 4 different enemy levels, where it's like very basic goon, and then kind of like goon plus, and then you actually have like a proper, this can threaten a party by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have one above that, which is spooky shit. That's literally called a nightmare. So I made, obviously it was a one enemy fighting the party, so that's the 3rd level, which is a terror.
Yeah.
Normally they're supposed to, according to the book, normally they have minions with them in their fights.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can kind of see why, but also, had he had a, like, reasonably, relatively dangerous minion,
Oh, we would have got stomped.
Oh yeah, I think we would have lost. It was
would've
very
I don't
that
know
would've been a
about
shit
I don't know about getting stomped, but it would have been rough. Even just
Well,
one
yeah.
extra combatant would have made it rough.
Yeah.
The reason I say we would have gotten stomped was because we were getting relatively low, and it was getting to dangerous parts when we won, and that was with him only being able to hurt us for 1 or 2 bars per turn. If you have another person in there, that is essentially a 50% damage boost.
That
I don't
said,
think we could have
actually
sustained
economy is
that.
better too.
that
Yeah.
said, he was as lethal as he was because I did pack him with some spicy options.
Oh, yeah.
The list of abilities for the monsters is not. I wish there were more choices. There were a healthy amount of choices, and a lot of them are in a way so that you can reflavor them. Obviously, the trample that allows you to shockwave for 1 point, you can flavor it a lot of different ways. In our fight,
Yeah.
he was just running around being a menace, just all over the damn place.
Yeah, it seemed like depending on the spacing and situation, he would either like cleave through and hit another person on the same swing, or he would like kind of, despite having like a slow lumbering look, he would still like have like a sudden dash where he hit another person.
Yeah.
Because like shockwave itself, you can kind of, it can either be a literal shockwave, it can be that, or like I don't know, like a fireball or something. Like it seems like it's pretty much whatever way you can imagine to hit more than one target at a time.
Yeah, they really tried to condense keywords and such for qualities and everything, so that sure, we may normally assign these terms to mean certain things, but some of these terms have been worded in such a way so that they're a little bit more vague, so they can be more universally applied to things. So we don't have to have two different words for an AoE deal damage, because melee is technically different, so we need a term for melee that says you can hit multiple targets in melee, and then we need a different term for you can hit multiple targets in ranged combat, like shockwave. Done.
Yeah. Which I think was pretty elegant.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's always a fucking question in a system. It's like, I have a gun. Can I shoot multiple people? How do I full auto? These are the questions that always come up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can see full auto just being shockwave. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's just shockwave.
Or if
It's
you're full
Can
autoing
I-
in that way.
Can I akimbo?
With shockwave.
That's my first thought. Whenever it's just like
Yeah.
gun, can I dual wield guns and it be meaningful? No, well that's kind of sad.
Until you need to reload, yes.
Yeah.
True.
But-
So, yeah, building him though, pretty easy. They, like I said, they have the template. They have a solid list of different abilities. A chunk of the options are passives. A chunk of the options are actives. And some of these passives literally just change an aspect of the character, but a lot of them give you some kind of reaction to something, which is nice. It is a little tedious to have to keep referencing back to the reactions, but especially when you're doing a one enemy combat, you kind of instinctively are like, cool, okay, he's going to react with this, he's going to react with that. It also helps with the action economy problem that a lot of boss fights have, in that they just get outacted. You get, 3 or 4 players taking a turn, and then the boss gets to go. Nah, you got reactions. They're going to try to kill the boss, give the boss, if they're supposed to be good at combat-related reactions, so that they can fight back, because it helps even things up a bit.
Yeah, I think the reaction that he had, I don't remember what it did. It was the scream. It put like, I think it was like added difficulty to your next attack against him, along with his aura that he had, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, his aura was just an ongoing thing. He could yell at you guys to give you the increased difficulty. He also had a reaction when he was below half health to hit for a lot of damage. Well, put you in the taken out state.
Yeah, I noticed. I
Was
was
that
like,
for below half health? I thought that was for if you lost the chainsaw. Did those just happen at the same time?
Yeah, they happened
Wait,
about
which-
the same time. Yeah, he
Oh,
got below half health,
Yeah. I
and
thought we were just
started.
made him angry.
No, just he got below half health, so he started handing out, taking out status effects.
Yeah,
Huh.
handing out naps.
Yeah, I
bastard.
was considering throwing the chainsaw back to him just because he was mad.
And we were talking about that. We're like, give him the chainsaw back. We took a stone away.
So my thought on it's like, man, this aura is breaking our balls. let's see if I can do anything to remove it. Maybe the chainsaw gives him the aura. And then I removed the chainsaw and it was immediately put through a table. I'm like, all right, cool.
Regret my action.
Wrong move.
Yeah.
Wrong move.
And now I get it.
Yeah.
It was a misunderstanding on our part, but goddamn, that's a hell of a fucking misunderstanding.
But there's
Very
absolutely like, even though there's not necessarily rules for that built in for making these enemies, but there's also nothing stopping you from going in and saying, I'm going to give them this ability, but I want it to be specifically tied to a certain part of the enemy. So if I wanted to say, yeah, the chainsaw is actually the source of the aura or whatever, could
You just
technically
can.
do that.
It just starts handing
the
out
rules
lines after.
And
there
there's
aren't rules
like
for it.
story
But
path
you can do it.
precedent for that with I guess to use Aberrant as an example again, you can have technology for your character that mechanically imitates powers and just uses the same rules. You just acquire it differently.
Hmm.
And it's pretty simple. You have the power when you have the thing. If it narratively gets removed somehow, you got to get the thing back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it'd be a good point to move on to the things that we liked about the game, because we were already talking about that kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked the streamline process, and I'm always a fan of investigative stuff. So the fact that it like kind of does investigation in a good way that isn't just prone to railroading you because shit's tough, you rolled like shit.
D10 dice pool urban fantasy horror. Say no more.
Dude, I just like dice pool systems. I'm kind of
Yeah.
done with single die systems.
I don't mind.
Tired of being a slave to variance.
Which, I mean, it's still variance, it's still dice. But I think honestly, a lot of it rides on what your modifiers are like in a D20 system. But I do enjoy dice pool systems a lot, just because I like how they work.
Dog shit is dog shit at the end of the day. I can't make it any better.
That's
I prefer
mean,
percentile systems personally.
is that because you're supposed to roll it?
Do you
It's
just
'cause,
like 100?
You might like Dragonbane, Brandon. It's a D20 system, but it works like Thaco style.
It's
God.
roll under.
Yeah.
The bigger
So-
your number, the the wider your range of successes.
I will say, as someone who has played a D&D where I had to work with Thaco, I rolled 20s very often.
Oh, the curse knows. Okay, never mind. That won't work.
The curse,
It's
the
aware.
curse is aware.
The curse does not care what your number you need is. You're just not going to get it.
Yeah, there you have it. Brandon is a special type of a curse called from the statistics lineage.
Oh god,
Oh no.
I've
From
mapped
the
it
role
out.
player family.
You
I've
get any
mapped it
powers
out.
for it?
No, suffering, anxiety.
Ah.
Is anxiety a power yet?
Me
But
too,
yeah,
buddy.
actually,
I hope so.
back on topic. It's hard not to like urban fantasy horror games. I have feelings about the setting. Still holding off on that, not getting there yet, but
Soon.
it's hard not to like it just because I'm a big World of Darkness fan. Even when there is annoying, stupid shit going on with certain companies making bad decisions and bad products.
What could you be talking about?
I still, things.
Molding.
Who am I kidding? We're never gonna play V5 on this.
Or W5. You don't want to play W5?
World of Darkness 5th, we don't like here. Just
Yeah, which is
We do not stand.
yeah.
some of us actually got into World of Darkness through V5 and like
Yes.
then found other editions and just liked them a whole lot more. And we're like, man, why do we play 5th edition? Like there were some things that were cool, but overall just
We might have
did not click with us.
might have an episode of Tabletop Archaeology where we talk about World of Darkness 5th.
We back
We're
in the
talking
wild
about-
times of,
Brandon.
We're talking about Vampire first.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
It was more than a decade ago. We were so old.
Yeah.
But
Wait, was it? Yeah, it was.
the system is a lot of fun. I enjoy that I get to have the entire like the entirety of the World of Darkness vibe in a single setting and book.
Yeah, I just wish there was more meat on the bones for each type of accursed. Like, I don't know. Call me crazy, but like, what if we took all of these and we really expanded them out and gave each accursed their own book? And then we just had the core rulebook just have all the meat of the system, and then each book just then you could just intermix all the books depending on what you wanted in your game.
Well, we have that right now. It's how the manuscript works.
I was making a Chronicles of Darkness joke, but
Yeah, it was a Chronicles joke. I'll pass.
Reverse engineer Chronicles of Darkness.
No, I do like that idea, though. I kind of wish World of Darkness worked like that.
Unironically, though, I do agree with you, Brandon. I do like that we have the essence of all of these different supernaturals, as well as some that we haven't had before in their own dedicated game lines.
Yeah.
But I do want to see, because I do like it, I want to see more about them.
Yeah.
That's not a gripe, that's just I like this, but I want more.
I hope they make more. Yeah, I think right now
it's hard to have enough.
Yeah, as the setting feels, it definitely feels like, I mean, as it is, pretty much, it's very new. Like this is the first product made for it, as far as I know. And it, I assume they'll be making more stuff that will expand the lore and the setting further. But if you like urban fantasy, which clearly all of us do, if you like analog horror at all, and just that general kind of vibe, a lot of Curseborne's atmosphere tries to play to that, especially like
Analog
I mean, like
horror.
they literally have liminal spaces. Like that's kind of
Creepypastas as well.
Yeah.
If any of that stuff is up your alley, you can find a space to represent it here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this right now, Zemian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to fight SCPs in Curseborne.
Oh, dude, let's go. Let's go.
That's nice.
Depends on the SCP.
Peanut smile.
I don't remember what that is.
I'm just gonna cut off my eyelids. It's cool.
I don't want to deal with the fucking basilisk.
Like unkillable reptile.
Central, do you know what a weeping angel is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's that, but it snaps your neck instead.
Oh, is it the statue made of concrete and rebar and shit?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's called
That they had to redesign because the original artist that they like got the photograph from put down a DMCA.
Yeah.
Oh, did someone just grab their art and slap it up there when they made the article?
It was some like Filipino artist, like actually from the Philippines, I mean. That like no, not super renowned or anything, not super important who they are. They used that because it was a wiki of just let's make monster.
Yeah.
But eventually, as like games started getting made and like they got more popular and people found out more about it, the dude I think found out and was like, "No, I don't want my art used.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I don't want my weird photograph edits associated with this." So they had to redesign Peanut.
Yeah,
I can kind of understand it. You know, if the thing that your art was used for inadvertently becomes really big, then you really run the risk of people thinking that you stole it when it's actually just yours. Because
one of the things for the game that I think it really has going for it is that immediate variety. Like you have before you even look at role, when you just look at lineage and family. If we have what was it? Seven lineages, 6 families apiece.
So something like that. Let's see.
Yeah, it's not exactly 6 families apiece. The numbers vary from lineage to lineage, but it's at least 5 or 6 options in each lineage, at least.
So we'll lowball it and even go to 5. You have 35 You have 35 potential like templates to just jump off of before you start like applying skill points or any attributes. Before you also get to rolls, and then you can then accentuate one of those by saying, "Hey, this is my major path." So
I think the major
you-
path thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, the major path thing is really nice because you could actually have more than one character in the same group, be the same lineage family combination, but still get different stuff from it.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like it doesn't. Like a lot of times they're fairly similar, or maybe that's just my experience because Chimera was like. It felt like it. If I had somebody who was Chimera, but they chose Outsider as their primary instead of what I did, which was choose Chimera as my primary, there wouldn't have been a significant difference.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them are close, but you won't be exactly the same. I mean, if you're playing in a group as small as ours with only 3 people, I mean, I would advise you to not overlap like that unless you're like really trying to tie your stories together or something.
I think you'd be hard pressed if you sat your players down and you had all options available to them. I think you'd be hard pressed to end up by accident having 2 people that are playing practically the exact same list of options.
Yeah.
If
I just noticed that like similarities can come very quickly if you decide to play like
similarities for sure. Like every lineage has its sort of arcane kind of nerd about magic, as well as their fighty option, their more social option. Like every lineage has a solid mix of things. No lineage is hardcore combat, or anything like that.
Yeah.
But similarities are fine. Ultimately, everybody's going to be different in some way, shape, or form. More than likely, unless you have a pair of players who are just very similar in tastes and they don't communicate and they just go after the exact same things by happenstance.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to happen because unlike Vampire, where it's like, well, I want to play a mage, and so 2 players are now a Tremere. Instead, it's okay. You have 2 sorcerers. Which families are they? Because you have sorcerers as an entire lineage and several families that make up different flavors of magic nerd.
Oh yeah, I think if you manage to like spread out your families, it can get really easy to make like very distinct characters. But like if we had 2 Chimera, it might get a little rough. Because at that point, the big like difference becomes what your path is, and that doesn't actually give you a lot, like your or interest path.
Sorcerer might be, now that I think about it, kind of an outlier in how varied the families are because, so the way, I guess to try to sum it up quickly, the way everyone else works by default is that each lineage has a set of 3 types of magic that they have access to by default. Sorcerers as a lineage have access to, was it 7? Yeah, 7 different ones and total. But each family has a set of 3 from that 7 that they get access to for their family, like the other lineages have their 3. So sorcerers tend to be really mechanically different just because you have access to different spells.
I think sorcerers are an outlier in that specific way, but like for example, just in the Outsiders, I can be a battlefield angel, which is literally I am God's own fucking children with a sword or LMG, and I'm ready to fuck shit up. I can be let me make a deal with the devil with you. I can play Poison Ivy. I can be Dan, which damned. So I think like they do well to make the families very distinct from each other. Literally one of the families of the Outsiders is like an Illuminati cult. Like you straight up have like it's an MLM. You
Oh my
you
God, I
become
forgot
an
about that.
outsider by joining this MLM,
I hate
I
it.
mean,
which is funny to me.
literally the least bad thing that could happen to you from joining an MLM.
That's true.
Yeah. So
Wild.
they're so
I
as
think
you
there's
can
a
see,
sorcerer family that's an MLM too, actually. Now that I think about it.
there's a lot of variety when it comes to making characters. It's definitely a strong suit. However, I have some 2 cents on that, but we'll get to that after we talk about things we don't like, because I have some thoughts on running this game for potential story guides
So,
at a later point.
Zemian, I'm sorry. I'm gonna tell you that you are gonna go last.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, at least you get to have the last word.
It's
You get
true.
to have the last word on the parts of the game that we don't like,
Yep.
because I know you're
Uh,
gonna go for a bit.
As far as things we do like, I will say, I don't remember if I said this on recording after the first session or not. This is, at least for me, the first rules light. I mean, I know the system doesn't call itself rules light, but Story Path Ultra is kind of a lighter story path. This is the first one of those systems that I actually enjoyed. Like, I feel like they do it in a way that is good and not in ways that get in its way. Like, a lot of those systems will try to mechanicize how you and the other player characters interact with each other and it kind of makes it sort of forced, and like a lot of focus is on that.
Mhm.
This one has technically some of that, I guess, where you're choosing your role path, where you're like, which person am I in the group? But it's not telling you, hey, you better talk to somebody about your secrets every session, or you won't get enough experience, etc. And the rules are simple without it really feeling like there just aren't enough, except for maybe the skill list. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So I think, at least the way I look at Curseborne and Story Path Ultra in general, I kind of see it as rules light done right.
Yeah, I appreciated its amount of the way it implemented not being as crunchy. I've been hearing people say chewy, so and I can kind of agree with it being chewy rather than just full on rules light.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
It's a nice nougat, like a Three Musketeer.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh, I want a Three Musketeer. I want a Snickers. I want both a Three Musketeer and a Snickers.
Get a Twix.
But do I want left Twix or right Twix?
So I'm not gonna answer that. So, with all of that being said, we liked. I can probably confidently say that we enjoy the system. We like the system.
Yeah.
Probably won't be our last time in the system. I'm going to be honest. I have thoughts, but one of the things that we do need to talk about, because there was talk about it at the end of the session last time, were things that we weren't the biggest fan of. Let's talk about the things that we didn't like about the game. And I want to start off by saying that I don't like the amount of actions you have access to. I feel like it's like, oh, you have 2 simple actions. Like, can I cast a spell and do anything else with that? Not really? Cool. It felt very limiting.
That makes sense.
Especially on a game that, like, everyone is supposed to have access to some sort of magic. Like, that is a very important part of the game. And I'm like, damn, I can't cast a spell. Fuck me. Because
didn't
I'm
we
too
find out
busy.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. Didn't we find out that like the book doesn't actually say what a simple action is?
That is true.
And that,
We
I
didn't
mean,
ever figure out what the distinction was.
we were in the middle of combat. I didn't want us to stop it to figure out, to be fair.
Oh.
But
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, but
but when I was looking later on, it was just like, oh, it's like 2 simple actions. It's like, because I don't think that you should be able to sit there, cast a spell, and attack. That's fine. But it just didn't feel. Something felt like I felt like I didn't have enough turn time, which is fine to a degree, but it feels like that with how important magic is, there should be. I don't know. I don't have a solution. I'm not a game dev.
Do you think that is because you are acclimatized to other systems where you have a grocery list of actions to take?
And it may be that reason.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. It's something that has occurred to me because like I said before, there for all of us to some degree there was a little bit of an adjustment period because while it is familiar in some ways, it is very different as well. I
Like
think
that
as far as what we've played on the podcast, this might be one of maybe 2 or 3 systems where it's been like you get kind of your movement and an action. And that's it, but combat moves faster.
Hey, it's not like World of Darkness where mostly this is house ruled, but you get an action. Moving is one of those. You can split your action into different things by splitting your dice pool. But
You can walk speed.
can you?
At
I
no
don't.
cost.
I
Yeah,
thought that was.
yeah, you can
I
walk.
thought that was
It's if you want to boost that speed to like a run or whatever is when it takes an action.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've played in I've played in enough games that get halves ruled often enough that sometimes I can't remember what's official and what's not.
Well, it's also easy to not really realize that they're only using walk speed when it's celerity action, celerity action, celerity action, celerity action, or alternatively
Yeah.
rage action, rage action, rage action, rage action.
Oh yeah.
Or alternatively, I make things up and teleport.
Yeah. The really good players use their rage actions for movement sometimes if you want to go faster than walk speed.
Gotta go
Yeah,
fast.
I thought that was an idea worth asking though, because I can imagine it could feel like that of I feel like I'm not utilizing my turn super well because I didn't do 5 things on my turn.
Yeah, and that might legitimately be what it is. Like it felt wrong because it's just like what the fuck did I do? That's right, I got slammed through a goddamn table again.
All right, you're out, which is essentially a stun.
Yeah,
Well, it's more than a stun if you don't have someone to heal you. That was pretty rough. Or
No.
no,
It
you could
was nice
help
to
you.
be the healer.
yeah,
No, with just taking out, you could have someone just shake you out of it, couldn't you?
yeah.
Okay.
As long as it was like I wasn't filled up on the damage boxes. And that was an issue that I ran into because one of the things I had access to is get a Leica that I was just like, no, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to take the thing that, if I use an elemental attack, I get a bunch of elemental bonuses and things like that. Never ended up using any of that shit. What I would have been able to use is I could have cast physical spells as reaction.
Oh.
Oh, like to like ready claws or something, or dodge or
Yeah.
something like that.
To essentially, I could have been like, okay, brutality.
That would have been insane.
Well, I was just like, I don't want to make a combat character. I'm gonna grab the elemental thing. That way, if I throw lightning bolts at people, I then make my claws elemental.
That's
Like
fair.
this would be really cool. And then I was just like, man, I fucked myself.
Played myself like a fiddle.
Yeah, I've seen some examples of stuff like that, and I'll use. I might get groans for this example, but they did this a lot, and I actually liked it in 5e. A lot of spells that include, or spells that either give you like a new mode to attack with, or like summon a thing to hit with, like spiritual weapon or something like that, will usually be like, yeah, when you cast this spell and as X kind of action on future turns, you can hit with it. So like the same turn you ready the thing that you're essentially buffing yourself with, you can use it.
Mhm.
And
So it doesn't absolutely ruin your action economy.
yeah, you don't like take a whole turn to do it, which can feel like you're going kind of slow, especially with a lot of fights in games. Like might only be like 3 or 4 rounds, using like a quarter of your time to basically draw your weapon can kind of feel bad.
Mhm.
Depending on how it goes. I mean, if you totally kick ass afterward, you probably forget that to go around. But it never seemed super crazy when I've seen that kind of thing in action in that game. Obviously, I don't know if it's the same in every game. Every game handles things differently. It's one of those things I would be willing to try out if, like, whenever we play again. Because I don't think it'd be, like, that nuts. For specific things, obviously.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. Is it's like I think there was just a part of me lamenting. Is it's like, man, I could have utilized this ability, and I didn't get to utilize this other ability literally at all.
I'm sad you never blasted the monster with lightning.
I really wanted to throw lightning bolts at it, but there was like no reason for me to, because it's like I have my claws out, I can just rip into him. And we're not fighting at range because he's in our mouth and throwing me through fucking tables.
You got wrestled.
Really hung up on that table situation.
I'm so I'm greatly amused by it, and also greatly annoyed by it. It's like the Lion, the Witch, the audacity of this bitch.
I'm glad to have delivered this experience upon you.
Why was I taking a drink right then? That was a poor decision on my part.
It can be funny.
You can never predict when Brandon is going to land a W.
No, I can't either.
Because the dice give him so many L's.
They do. They so do.
Does Dami have anything he wants to add to not liking about the game?
Skills. I'm gonna be real. With how few, not just the amount of skill points. Like you always wish you had more. And we played a starting character game. It makes sense we don't have a ton. However, holy fuck! Like we ran into multiple moments where it was just like, what skill is applicable here? I don't know. None of these fit.
Yeah. I will say this.
I do wish
Part of
there
that
was,
is
like, 3 or 4 more skills. I don't need a ton. It just felt like there wasn't the right amount.
Yeah, there was a couple times where we encountered that question of, man, nothing inherently feels correct. Part of that is probably would have benefited me to just refamiliarize myself with the skill list. I did it when I started looking at Trinity Continuum a while ago. It's been a hot minute. But there's definitely, like, while the condensed skill list is nice, I feel like there could be room for maybe 1 or 2 more.
Base perception.
3.
A base perception skill, for the love of God.
I actually hate base perception skill. Please no. I don't like skills that are mandatory regardless of what your build is.
Yeah, I don't need it. Having a skill in whatever the field that you're relevant for your perception is fine.
My issue there was no I look around and try to observe skill. Like I'm looking, like I just look out.
Well, the idea is if you're looking around,
It's
I
an
describe the
investigation.
scene to you, or it's an investigation.
Yeah.
Like
Which I'm fine with. I actually I hadn't really thought about it, but I guess in there the role you're making isn't necessarily how well do you see, it's do you look in the right place?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's becoming more common in systems to not have a perception, or just if it's visible, it is described, and there is maybe an investigation skill or something to that effect to find hidden things.
I have played in games before where the scene was literally just not described. And if, like, I didn't ask what was physically around us, this was not be told. Until
That feels like bad GMing.
Came up, like, in our disfavor. But yeah, it was annoying.
It feels that way because it is.
Yes.
Okay.
They specifically were, I was just like, why didn't I know, like, the ceiling was this high or something like that? Like, oh, you didn't ask. Like, character has eyes, though.
Yeah, I feel like having a bit of extra skill points and skills would allow like more diverse stuff. Because I'm gonna be real, I think 99% of the rolls I made were esoterica. Just
I did realize I could roll esoterica for a lot of things.
I didn't mean to do specifically that, but I did that.
Same.
So, any other dislikes before I unleash the fury of a hamster with my dislikes?
Wait,
I don't know if it's
hamster.
how we handled things or if like that's indicative of just how the game plays, but it feels like investigations are a bit, I guess, too compact, maybe.
Yeah, I will say I was trying to feel it out because it was obviously new to me. And being new to the system is like, okay, let's try this out, get a feel for how this works. Effectively stretching in a way. I feel like I could probably do it better now. But I can kind of agree. I don't, because like I said earlier, I don't feel like an automatic clue is necessary. But I understand not everybody is as confident or as experienced in running games. And so removing a failure state is better for them. And I know there are people that ascribe to the idea that there should never be a failure state. I don't entirely agree with that.
Fair.
I feel like you kind of remove, personally, I feel like that's removing some of the game element. That doesn't mean
I definitely
the game ends because the investigation didn't work out. It just means it takes a different path.
I definitely feel like there should always be a failure state in like general gameplay because that's what gives you stakes and what makes things exciting, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you can't fail, why do I care?
And I think good
Yeah.
story can come from failure too.
Oh yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
unrelated. I am suffering in another game I'm in because we failed a combat, and I am in a scene that is going to change my character's dynamic, which I think is cool. Like
Nice.
it is. We play these games because not being able to control all the circumstances is what makes things exciting. If you wanted to be in control of everything, you do freeform RP.
Or read a book.
Yeah.
Or write
Which
a
I
book.
guess is freeform RP.
Yeah. I understand the more focus on narrative and everything. I appreciate that. I appreciate that we're getting more mechanics and tools in games for following narrative. But man, sometimes, like, I gotta agree, sometimes I feel like it's taking a little bit too much game out of my role-playing game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things where, you do what's best for your table, listener. Us personally, obviously, we like a little bit more game with our role play. Some people definitely prefer role play to be the main and second dish.
Yeah.
With
I mean,
a little bit of game as a side.
yeah. I was trying to think about just now, like, oh, where do I fall in this spectrum? And I'm like, well, it doesn't really necessarily it's not a single slider, right? Like it's, they're not inversely proportional to each other. You can have a lot of both if you really like the game part and really like the role play. I don't think they necessarily get in the way of each other, depending on the system. But
you can definitely ignore.
that's why we're doing reviews, though, so that you can listen to people who've played it and then know ahead of time. You'll like the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My big issue with the game, and when I say your mechanics are going too far, is when your mechanics start telling me how I should RP.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, that's
And
like
I'm not.
what I was talking about earlier with a lot of those life systems.
Yeah.
Oh, that
And I'm not
actually
talking about
reminds me of
like.
something I didn't like when you're done.
Yeah. And like there are some systems that's like, hey, you've suffered a bunch of stress, so now your character is like a little bit on edge, and like that's fine. You're not dictating, hey, if you want to be able to play the game, RP this way. Like
Yeah,
if you're saying a
absolutely.
consequence of something that built up has now caused your character to like fight, flight, or freeze, I'm down for that. A lot of horror games do that, and I think that's a great way to accentuate how much stress is in a situation.
Mechanics should, if you're going to have mechanics interact with the roleplay itself, they should encourage the roleplay, but at the end of the day, give you options in how you engage with those mechanics in the roleplay. Similar to you, Brandon, I despise a system that has the audacity to tell me you must play this way outside of certain circumstances.
New 5R,
There are some systems that it's done for a very specific reason, and it's good for that. New 5R, I don't think it's one of those. New 5R is, you have to roleplay this way as part of a failure state, and it's not a fun kind of failure state, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand some people out there like New 5R. No smoke to you guys. Like what you like, but fourth is great.
No smoke for him. I'm bringing the full Flammenwaffen.
Brandon still feeling violence after that Fireborn arcology
God. No, mechanics should encourage and inform RP. It should never dictate.
Yeah.
All right,
Damiani. The system does do that fairly well.
Yeah.
You get when you are like, hey, you're at this point, you need to do a thing. You do have options. You're not in a box. You have choices to make.
Which is nice. And then Damiani, you said you had another thing that you didn't like. Nope. Is Damiani kill?
I think he's.
Oh,
dead.
sorry. Here we go. I'm about to knife your tires. Here.
Okay.
Because I'm going to talk about the thing that I don't like because it is a mechanic that tells me how to roleplay. Torments. I'm sorry. I do not like. I like that the personal torment. You can choose what your way to get like curse dice is.
I didn't hear what you said.
I'm talking about torments and why I don't like. Because like we were talking. Zemi was saying it does pretty well at not dictating your roleplay, and torments are exactly that. Literally as a outsider accursed, like one of my torments has to be I am a complete dickhead to everyone around me every so often. Just I treat you all like shit. That just I especially if I need to be working with you.
Well, and that's kind of the thing. Because I give it a pass here because your torment is part of the supernatural you're playing. So if you really don't like the torment, there are other options to play.
My thought on that is I think that's kind of unique to the Outsiders, because it was not like that for
No, it wasn't yours. You have to like straight up beat one of us.
No, my damnation was I became enraged.
Oh, that was your damnation.
Yeah.
See, I don't have a problem with damnations. I kind of like the you hit 0 curse die, something wonky happens.
Yeah, your curse.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Okay.
My torment was if someone fucks around with you or your pack, they find out. And I'm like, that's great. Golden. Like, does it make it harder for you to play like a demure, like more reserved primal? Yeah. I can see where that becomes an issue. Absolutely.
I guess maybe playing an outsider, like it felt so extreme. Because, like,
Yeah.
it's straight up, here's the wording for it. A character with this torment finds the needs and concerns of mundane humanity are wearisome, choosing to use her friends and colleagues as pawns and assets in the grander game against the Archons. When she succumbs, she becomes self-absorbed, ignores social obligations, and generally treats her friends and family like dirt, especially if she needs to be working with her family right now. Like, it feels so like I have to now be disruptive to the role play, and that made me not want to generate curse die. Like, I'm so glad that you had a loophole thing, because I would otherwise just have not been able to use my powers, because that made me afraid to do that.
Well, I will say, I think I think you might be looking at it in only the extreme case, because it is worded in such a way where you have choices in how you engage with it. It can be as simple as mom is calling and you are dodging her calls for a week, or, well, not a week, but you dodge her calls for the day, which is going to annoy her and upset her, but
See,
at the end of the day, it's not going to ruin your relationship.
I guess the wording makes me think that it's like you do this to everyone for like an amount of time. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that to the party, because that's not fun for the role play. If I'm just suddenly an asshole to you guys because you guys mean nothing in the war against the outside, fucking that's not fun. It's not furthering the role play. It's not doing anything.
And that's where I'll say this is one of the reasons why I think this system is better suited to longer play rather than short adventures, one shots, what have you.
Mhm.
Not exactly a gripe, but it also kind of is. Because it's a cool system, and the way it enables you to kind of just have a one shot type enemy is nice, but with how character focused the system is, makes it not perfect for short little 3 or 4 session romps.
Mm-hmm. Well, so like I guess because of how short everything was going to be, I was able to kind of definitely avoid interacting with that. But it does
Yeah.
the thing that I say I don't like about any system. A mechanic makes me afraid to interact with it. I think that is an objectively bad thing to do in whatever your system is make a player afraid to interact with the system.
I would
And
say that kind of loops back around to buying into the character that you want to play. Because like if this torment just doesn't sound fun to you, then you don't play this kind of character, because there are so many other options. If it was like it was this or one other option or only this, absolutely understand, I agree. But with how many options there are,
well, the I guess on some level I get it. Like, you can just play something else, but like if I want to play an outsider, if I want to do like I want to be an angel, I'm forced into that bit. And that's what one of the 5 different lineages that exist right now.
it's
So
like
if I don't like
years.
this, it locks me out of 20% of character options.
Yeah. No.
It's
And
less than 20%, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling that way or anything. I do think it's worded in a way that sounds more severe than it really is, but it's also worth
And that might be the
noting,
case.
because it didn't come up, because like I said, this game is definitely geared towards longer play. So it didn't come up, but bonds are important in Curseborne. Your relationships in play, from what I have gathered and read and such, are supposed to be waxing and waning from strain because you're cursed. Everybody has to deal with that to some degree. Outsiders end up having to focus on it more because, well, they're aware that they're not entirely from here, so it's the torment there is to emulate, like, yeah, it's kind of a struggle sometimes to be human because you know you're more than.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the other ways that they did it for outsiders. That's just this specific, like the torment was my gripe. It sounded, at least when it was first described to me with like some of the other characters, it sounded, pretty severe across the board. I may have misunderstood at that time, but it just kind of left a odd taste in my mouth for the system. And ultimately, I enjoyed the system. That was one of my
Yeah. I think that's the real challenge with the torments, because they are generally like, they obviously have a guideline of when they pop off or what have you, but how exactly you engage with it is up to you. So it's, when you're making a character, that would be my advice to anybody. When you're making a character in this system, know your torment and really give it the big think. How is your character going to manifest that? How does your character handle that? For example, if you're a get-alike or whatever, you have that torment where anybody who fucks with your people is going to find out. How exactly do you go about it? Because that does not necessarily mean I go berserker rage right now and rip you in half. At least as far as I know, unless it specifically says get in a fight right now.
So the damnation has something like that, but it's like it specifies the taken out state, ruined reputation. I've dealt aggravated damage. That's what the damnation does when I have 0 curse die. That's what I have to do. But ruined reputation is part of that.
Yeah.
And I kind of like how severe the damnations are, at least, because like my damnation is say goodbye to all your bonds, all of them. You have to make a new one in order to get your curse die back. And I think that's kind of fun. Like, do you push it makes it so like you gotta make sure you hit no curse die. You don't hit no curse die, because is this big drawback worth the emptying your tank?
You better make it count. You use that last one. Mine's the sorcerer one is kind of funny mechanically, because so sorcerers can quick cast. I can decide when I cast the spell to just not pay the cost, but it adds a complication that if not paid off can cause some collateral damage. And the damnation is once you run out of curse dice, you have to use magic for everything, even if it's wildly overkill. It completely the need to use magic completely overkills your character until you gain a curse die. So in every aspect of your life, you are tempting fate and possibly causing some kind of collateral damage, and also doing stuff that you really don't need to do, but you do need to do it. You have to. Magic calls to be.
Which I think would be a perfect way to segue into what I imagine is going to be primarily setting gripe.
So I do want to start with I might have to start with setting, because now that I'm on my spot, my thoughts are leaving me.
I feel that.
Because I did have a mechanic gripe. Right. So mechanics. I talked about earlier, I alluded to it earlier, that having more meat on the bones for the different types of supernaturals, or well, the accursed as they're called in this. That is kind of a gripe I have, in that I do wish there was some kind of either resource tracker or a built-in countdown clock or something to that effect for the different accursed. Everybody has something that they want or need to do, and the lore says, hey, you need to do this, or else, your survival may even be on the line, or at least life is going to get really bad for you. But then the only mechanical countdown clock for that is how many curse dice you have. So the most egregious example that comes to mind, the sorcerer's lore. as Sindra was saying, you need to cast magic constantly. The sorcerer's lore is saying, hey, you at minimum should be casting some kind of magic at least every 3 days, effectively. You're probably going to be doing it more than that because you're a sorcerer, but if you go more than 3 days without casting a spell, it is like going through some of the worst withdrawal symptoms you can imagine because they're literally addicted to magic.
Yeah, it is kind of strange when I think of it.
But mechanically, nothing says you have to do that. As long as you have curse dice, you don't need to spend a scene saying, I go do some magic.
Yeah, you can
just not. A vampire in this setting does not have a blood pool to manage. They do not have to go feed until they decide they want to go get a curse die. The things you have to do for your survival or comfort or your benefit, whatever it may be, depending on what a curse you are, you only have to engage with it when you need to get curse die. Some people, I will say, will probably like and prefer this. I get it. However, me personally, I like having to deal with the management aspect of it, of if I'm playing a vampire as an example, I want to have that pressure of I need to feed regularly. I'm not as much of a fan of having it kind of just pushed in the background and, well, it's not super important to the story, so we're just not really going to talk about it or acknowledge it. We'll just assume it's happening. I'm not a huge fan of that. Some people may prefer it this way, but that's a gripe I have. I especially am missing having something akin to rage on werewolves or any of the shifters. They get chalked up as mean, aggressive people to some degree, but not a ton of mechanical backing for it outside of their damnations and such. It ends up leaving the accursed to me feeling like very diet versions of how they would appear in other games. You have this very flavorful, very nice to look at skin of whatever this accursed you're playing is. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of individual mechanics pushing you to fulfill certain needs or what have you. Just this curse dice system. So that's my big mechanical gripe. I wish there was something to push the different accursed to manage their wants and needs.
Yeah, I could see that too, actually. It was something that I didn't really think about in the context of a short game, but yeah, as you were talking about it, I was like, oh, I wonder if curse dice just drained slowly over time, but that wouldn't necessarily work for every type of a curse. Like, it would work for the hungry, but it might not work for the sorcerers, where the sorcerers, it might be like, oh, if you go too long without casting a spell, whether a quick cast or with a curse die, maybe something will happen. Rather than curse dice just going down.
Yeah, but curse dice don't pass over time. You just have them.
Yeah.
Which if you wanted a homebrew, they go down over time. Sure.
Yeah.
But
well, like I said,
like,
that
was just my moment of revelation, because I have been doing some prep for another game that's going to be like a one-on-one play-by-post type game, and I was looking more at sorcerer lore and stuff, and I encountered this description of how often they have to do it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And as I was reading it, things were kind of clicking in the back of my mind. I had this revelation where it was like, wait a minute. As long as I have curse dice, if I go through like a month of downtime, there's nothing forcing me to do magic. Like, sure, can we as players and storytellers or story guides or whatever say, well, of course you do some casual magic in your downtime. Yes, we could. But for me, there is definitely that layer of the mechanics aren't simulating the setting. And for some people, that's not a big deal and it's utterly unnecessary. But I like mechanics that simulate the setting because for me, it makes the game feel more immersive.
Mhm.
So that's my gripe there. So with that, the rest of this is about the setting. Yeah, I both like and dislike the setting. I will give Onyx Path Publishing the credit they deserve. They are very good about saying, do what works for your table. There are all kinds of dials you can adjust to make the game work for you, however you want it to work. You want it darker? You make it darker. You want it to be more horrific? You can. You want to make it more hopeless? You can. You want to make it more hopeful and brighter and what have you? Absolutely. Knock yourselves out. However, especially compared to previous Onyx Path titles, there were not as many built-in knobs with this game. The setting as presented is very bare bones. There is not much here. There is a little bit of lore for the families, some snippets for the lineages on the whole, and enough to give you an understanding of liminalities and loopholes and battlegrounds and the idea of the outside as well as the idea of the accursed and their place in the world. Which I'll give you the short version. The short version is the world is a little bit darker version of our own world. There is the outside, which is essentially a collection of just realms outside the mortal world, outside of the mortal universe, I should even say.
Yeah, it's like alternate
Where-
realities and shit.
Yeah, it's where you can find demons and Cthulhu and all kinds of other stuff. Literally anything you can imagine can be in the outside. That's all fine and dandy. The accursed are people who are sometimes born a certain way or are magically cursed or any number of reasons. Maybe they even died and they've come back as some kind of ghost. There's a lot of different ways to become accursed, but the accursed are those where they have particularly powerful curses on them that'll enable them to access supernatural powers. And my first initial gripe about the setting is they describe curses as the reason why things suck. Anything that is bad in the world can be chalked up to curses. One of the examples they gave was so-and-so having cancer is because they're cursed, which is a
Okay.
choice.
Yeah.
I was not thrilled about reading this because I think it takes a lot of responsibility out of the hands of bad people. Because saying, "Oh, it's curses all the way down," where does it stop? Where is somebody responsible for their own actions versus, well, they acted that way because they had a bad childhood because their parents were cursed. Okay, well, if it's curses all the way down, come on. You got to hold people responsible. I'm sure they don't mean it in as dramatic of a way, but that's how it read when I read it. That said, that leads to my second issue in that because of how cursed everything is and all of that, they also go on to say outright, they tell us what the game isn't. And they say this is not a game about conspiracy. which I'm not a fan of, to be brutally honest. I'm not saying it has to be like WoD, World of Darkness, or anything like that, but
Where everybody is a alien spy.
yeah, but telling me in this, because that's always the question in an urban fantasy world where the masses don't know about the supernatural stuff happening, is how is it kept secret? Urban fantasy, by default, there is an assumed level of conspiracy, because hiding the fact supernatural exist is a conspiracy. It may not be super formal, it may not be global Illuminati type shit, but at some level there's a degree of conspiracy when you are keeping something like this secret.
Yeah, I think it's part of it's part of what makes urban fantasy interesting, in my opinion. That
Yeah.
the idea that, well, it's a secret, and the average person just thinks they're living in the normal world that we're living in. So, like, you can kind of think about it, like, as you're reading or playing a game, it's just like, like, it kind of feels like the real world could be that if potentially, obviously,
Yeah.
like,
The
it lets you
explanation,
immerse yourself in that extra way.
yeah, the explanation they give is everybody just kind of rationalizes away anything they see, which I will say this is a point that should have been expressed a lot more in previous World of Darkness games, because there are plenty of players I have encountered who do not understand how much people are willing to rationalize things, especially a one-time event in passing. That is just weird. But there is a threshold of, if somebody sees something to a certain extent, their mind is going to break one way or another. And, the book does set up for the idea of what they call venators, but hunters, people who are aware of the accursed and are hunting them. So, okay, people rationalize things, but obviously not everybody does. Some people come to realize and go to do something about it, which then means, okay, so they're probably telling people, and then people aren't listening to them because they think they're crazy, which is a normal thing. But this still begs the question to me, what is the government doing about this? Like, I get it. If you don't want to go there, fine, but I feel like a missed opportunity for an antagonist faction. Like, if not the government, why don't we have something akin to, like, the SCP Foundation hunting these weird, unexplained things to study them? Like, this is an easy antagonist to have.
That would be pretty cool too, and it would fit right in with the genre. I think would be enjoyable.
Absolutely, because the reality is, this is our world but darker. Go back even a few decades, the government was actively looking into psychic powers and if ESP is real and all kinds of crazy shit. Rationalize it all you want, but if supernaturals exist, the government probably knows about it and is getting involved in some ways. But even aside from a national level issue, because they clearly want to tell a more grounded local story with this game, I feel like it's a very important question of what happens if cops find out there are supernatural active. This book doesn't do anything to answer that question, which is a question that's going to come up. We play tabletop RPGs. We know how players are. That question has to get asked and answered, because eventually somebody's going to do something, then the cops are going to get called. It's just going to happen. So My question becomes, who in the family has connections in the cops? Like, who in the city controls the cops, potentially, even? Like, what's going on here? Because something has to get covered up. Supernatural or not, if somebody ends up murdered, the law is coming for you. So you need the information to square that circle. So I understand why they wanted to go no conspiracy, and I respect that, but personally, I can't run the setting in that way. I can't run this game like that. I have to have a level of conspiracy element because I just can't make that world make sense in my head without it existing. Some of you may be totally fine to, don't want to do it. Cool, more power to you. But that's my gripe, one of my gripes for the setting. I have more, but you had something you wanted to say, Dami.
I was going to say, and I think that's like very much we're in a group that is like that. I think that one of the draw points of urban fantasy is like the gritty, how do you keep your secrets? And that is in of itself a conspiracy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, I think to try to remove that, I get trying to keep it more on a local level. And I think that maybe they could have handled it differently to have that. But I think removing it entirely is a mistake for just the general theming ways.
Not to mention, there are several factions within the families themselves, within the separate lineages, that vie for power and vie to keep and gain secrets. That's going to lead to conflict, and that is not a thing well covered.
Well, I think also the Hungries, like, I haven't read into them a lot just because, like, mostly read into the one I was playing. But the Hungry lineage was mentioned a lot as seeking to control, or to gain control of things and systems and such. I think it's built into their damnation. Like, they have a need to control and manipulate and such. So, like, I have to kind of assume that some of them put themselves into positions of mundane political power. But keep things secret somehow.
Yeah.
Like, they would be on the radar if they weren't secret about it. It'd be noticeable.
They'd have to be. Yeah. I mean, there are multiple, it sounds like MLM families. And like that like, say what you want. We're not gonna deep dive that, but like MLMs are kind of in the business of accruing power and like status and whatnot.
Knowing what I do about, or what I've heard about like cults and stuff at this point, it kind of tracks. I'm not surprised that there's like multiple of those.
Yeah.
I don't remember if there was, I feel like there was one, but there was a sorcerer family.
So this does connect to my next complaint about the setting. While there are some things there, like you guys have mentioned, I feel like there's not enough inherent conflict like there is, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep making these comparisons, but it's literally impossible to talk about this game without talking about World of Darkness. You just can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same people, so
it's in the same reason you cannot talk about Pathfinder without talking about D&D.
Yeah,
they're in the same realm, same genre, same sort of system. It's impossible to avoid it. While there are some things that kind of set up some inherent conflict, there's not enough, in my opinion. For example, we have, across the different World of Darkness game lines, we have very strong lore that says this group and this group do not get along whatsoever. They hate each other's guts. So and so and so and so have been allies for ages, on and on, all kinds of different groups. there are some faint traces of some potential antagonism here and there, but there's not a lot of explicit, this group and this group will never get along. They are just too different. They are constantly at each other's throats. Part of that is because we don't get a ton of history off of the different families and lineages. We just get a little bit because, and once again, I like this aspect, but it is still part of my gripe regardless. They want to leave it more of a sandbox to let you do what you want with it and make your own lore. I do like that, but if I'm wanting to sit down and just grab some groups and have some inherent conflict, so that's already kind of established for me, it's not entirely absent, but it's not as easy as it could be. If I'm talking to a vampire player and, you know, we can make a joke about how much of a bad idea it is to leave a Ventrue and a Bruja in a room alone together for too long.
Or a good idea if you don't like either of those people.
Yeah.
True. Because most vampire players can come to the conclusion, no, that could potentially be bad. But in Curseborne, we don't have anything really similar to that, it feels like. We can make guesses and make assumptions, but nothing like that is hard baked in. Which, like I said, it's nice to be able to make those kinds of decisions for yourself, for your own table, without having to explain to the players, like, I know the lore says this, but I want to do this instead. It's nice to not have to be beholden to pre-established lore, but it does mean, as a story guide, if you want to have that stuff, you have to put more work into setting up your game. Because you can't just say, well, there's a group of Bruja over here, and there's a group of Ventrue over here, and naturally they don't get along. Instead, you're going to be like, well, there's some get-alike over here, and there's some Raptors over here. I feel like they shouldn't be best friends, though. But what should they be, like, beefing over? And it's a little bit of having to jump through some hoops and answer more questions. And if you're a new story guide, I imagine that can be a little bit more intimidating, especially if you want to have a very deep, rich location with a bunch of NPCs and stuff. But if you're not concerned about that thing, then obviously it's not really much of a negative for you. That said, I have some thoughts for potential story guides that I would like to share, because these are things that have come to me as I've been prepping both for this game and another game now. The other game being something more long form, and working through my thoughts on how to run a long-term Curseborne game. Because I sat down and decided I don't want to play explicitly Earth. There's too much shit going on in the world right now, and I want my Earth flavor, but not related to current day bullshit. Or just real world bullshit at all. So, started developing my own Earth, but that came up to questions of, okay, what do I want the player options to be? Because I imagine we're going to have people who are familiar with World of Darkness coming into this game to give it a try. They're probably going to be used to having limitations on what they are or aren't allowed to play. Curseborne doesn't have any inherent factions or anything, which is actually another gripe I have. I feel like there needs to be proper factions, like something comparable to the Camarilla or Sabbat from Vampire. Like, we have supernatural people running around. I feel like there's going to be a group of supernatural people that really just lean hard into being monsters. Like, a Sabbat equivalent group is a no-brainer in my mind. And you can still have them just at a local level. Like, just give us ideas at least. if you don't want to commit to there being like the whole conspiracy thing and having political factions, that's fine. But at least give us some ideas and some frameworks to play with. That would be great. I don't need hard to find lore. Just give me some ideas and things I can tweak. Anyways. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out, do I limit the options at all? Because the reality is there's a ton of options. And if you're trying to build out a location with a set number of NPCs and such, it suddenly gets very daunting, because what happens if you make all these NPCs and then your players end up picking families that you don't have NPCs for? Because, as Brandon mentioned, there's over 35 different options. So unless these accursed are under every damn rock in your city, chances are you're not going to have an NPC that represents one of the families. Unless you're really going to sit there and be like, yeah, I'm going to crank out 100 accursed NPCs that are in this city, which, stop, get some help.
That just sucks. But
Yeah, that's too much. Go check out GM Grimoire about prep.
yeah, I mean, it could be something like, yeah, these are the types of NPCs I've decided are here. If you're from a different lineage or family, you're probably from out of town. Or might be the only one in town.
Which I was going to get to, because that's an option. You could sit there and say they're new to town, whatever, and just leave everything open.
Yeah.
However, some people may not agree with this, but I think the best way to go about it, put the game in front of your players, have them make their characters. Do not have a ton of stuff about the city decided. Like, understand what the city is like. All the stuff that's relevant to normal people. Have a good idea of that stuff. Let your players make their characters, pick what families they want to be from, all that stuff. No restrictions. Unless you do have something very specific in mind. But otherwise, let them pick for themselves. Then go in. Take from that list, depending on how many players you have, maybe add 1 or 2 families more, or a personal favorite, or whatever. And then have that be your set list of families in the city. Because you don't have to have every family represented in a city. You're not required to. And personally, I think I've found it more interesting for creating the social and political dynamic amongst the accursed to have it be constrained in some way. Because it's easier to sit there and say, well, why are only these families here? Or alternatively, if there are only a couple, which family was here first? What is there a power structure? Are they all just sharing the city and it's only like personal beefs here and there? Or is one group dominant, trying to lord over the others? There's a lot of really great questions you get to ask yourself about the setting and define. But you create this set list of families that are present, and then that gives you your pool to pick from for making NPCs, for figuring out what are those political dynamics, and pretty much everything else for just the accursed end of the city, and filling out all those details. I think personally that's probably the best way to go about things, especially if you want to go hard into political drama. Or just cross family drama in general. Because if you're going to make it very focused on the bullshit the different families deal with, as well as bullshit within the families, you're also going to benefit from having a more limited list of families available. Because if you're trying to do that for 30-something different families, woof. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Bringing it down to 5 or 6, suddenly a lot more approachable.
Yeah, and I think I agree with tailoring which factions are there based on what the players want to play, doing it in that order,
Yeah.
which it seems like is what you did.
Yeah, this game, for this short adventure, I literally only did the only 3 families that are present are the families the players picked. I wrote up a tiny little bit of lore in case it came up. It, for the most part, didn't, but it was a neat thought experiment, and it did help inform how I was doing things for the longer form game. So another alternative is you could sit there and completely fill out the city, fill out what families are there, and then tell the players, these are the list of families you can choose from. And that's it. If you do want to do that, I highly recommend you offer a variable spread. I would try to at least have one family from each lineage, unless there is a lineage you very specifically just do not want to deal with for whatever reason. I don't think any of them are particularly obnoxious to deal with in any way, so if you have reasons for wanting to avoid one, knock yourself out. But personally, I'm not as big of a fan of that way, but if you have a certain situation in mind, maybe you'll find that more beneficial for you. But doing that, and then I would definitely recommend considering having some kind of factions amongst the accursed. If you're going to do like political stuff, or even just drama in some way, people have a tendency to form groups in one way or another. Now you're going to have accursed running around. The accursed are going to have different ideas on things. You know, for example, you might have some outsiders who really think that they need to find a place for their own in the outside. And that could be interesting. You know, they could have their own little faction that has this really weird philosophy, and maybe they treat humans like dirt and what have you. Meanwhile, maybe you have a group of heirs that actually believe in helping the blue-collar worker and really staunchly believe in pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. And, you know, maybe they are a very financially powerful faction within your city. And more interestingly yet, maybe they're not exclusively heirs. Maybe they are a mix of accursed in the city that are very business-minded. And
so it can be spread between different lineages.
Yeah,
So
because you could sit there.
Sorcerer 1, 2.
Yeah, because if you have these factions that have some kind of power and suddenly there's a problem in your city and say you do need financial support to resolve this problem, maybe you need to approach this faction instead of just doing well, there's this specific heir you have to go to and convince him to give you money. If you make it a faction, you could do some interesting things. So, things to think about, things to consider. I'm not saying these are the only ways to play this game or necessarily the best ways. I think they are the best for my table and how I like to run urban fantasy stories for me. But those are just my thoughts, my opinions. Take them or leave them. At least, hopefully, they are food for thought for you to consider alongside this review. Or if you are planning to pick up Curseborne, make some considerations.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of potential in the system as a sandbox. It is a cool sandbox. I just wish it came with a couple more toys. That's my big gripe.
Which is a fair gripe.
It's a pretty good analogy. It definitely feels like the kind of thing where like they're laying a foundation for it and probably want to release more content in the future. That's making an assumption. Obviously, I don't know for sure.
They
I
are planning to continue to support the game. They have several ideas for more books and fiction and stuff to come. That said, they very explicitly want to avoid metaplot. So you are highly encouraged to develop your own metaplot. Whatever you want it to be, whatever you want it to look like. Just if you want your metaplot to be something more than dealing with outside bullshit, like if you want political metaplot, you are going to have to do a lot of lifting for yourself. The book.
Okay, so they're kind of defining what the accursed are and how they do their things and like what the outside liminalities are, but beyond that.
Yeah, like they kind of touch on politics, like, but it's also not great in how they do it. For example, when we encounter the loophole issue, the lore says accursed don't allow other accursed to own loopholes privately. They are a public thing that are safe ground, essentially, to have meetings. And then there is an edge that gives you access to a loophole.
Yeah, despite everyone should have access to loopholes if they're nearby.
Yeah, and with how valuable loopholes can be, I can't imagine a world where they are not fought over.
Someone's gonna try to just open it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to run a very World of Darkness style Curseborne game, you can do it. There's just no built-in factions. There's not a lot of gas here for political stuff. Obviously, you have different supernaturals. You have their fragments of lore and such. There is absolutely things you can do. There's just very little pre-made for you. So it is just going to be more work. But I think because you can totally customize it, you can do some really cool things with it. It does have a lot of potential. What I'm saying is I would like a book that isn't necessarily all about just facts and fleshing out the setting and giving us a meta plot. I don't want that. I want a story guide focused book that is just a bunch of knobs and dials and sliders and all of this that give us a lot of tools, maybe some mechanics similar to like the genre and subgenre rules from Aberrant.
Yeah.
Give us some stuff like that for Curseborne. Give us some faction ideas and similar things like that. Just a big story guide book of just stuff like that would be amazing. I would love that so much. But yeah, those are my thoughts. If anybody has anything else they want to add.
Well, I knew that you had a bit to go there, and I know that we've discussed that to a good length. I think partially during the recording and partially after.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to just kind of cook for a minute. All in all, like I would like more setting bits, primarily because I don't know, maybe I'm fucking cynical. And I look at all these super powerful supernatural factions and it's like, there's no way everyone's playing ball with each other. In fact, legitimately, two of the hungry factions are at odds with each other. The Iscariots and the Heirs. The Iscariots are, if that name sounds familiar to you, it might be because you have encountered the Bible at some point.
Yeah.
As they are based off of fucking Judas.
And like this is the perfect example I'm talking about. Like the Iscariots and the Heirs are set up to not get along. And so you can read that as well, they do have some inherent conflict there. And it is kind of there. But it's not it's not fully fleshed out in any way, and it also doesn't have to be that way. Like, they don't have to hate each other in any way. It's still very much in that sandbox nature where how much they don't get along is up to you. So it's this really kind of, I don't want to call it a half measure because that's not what it is. But it's not quite these two will never get along, but it's not quite they're playing nice together either. Because realistically, an Iscariot and the heir probably shouldn't get along whatsoever.
No.
But we don't have anything in the setting materials to really support that. Because you're kind of encouraged. You can just mix and mash whatever into your party and just roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really up to you how tenuous that may be. Which, I will say, they have been pretty openly talking about found family as a theme. They also want the game to be a little bit more hopeful than World of Darkness titles and to have punching up as a theme, and that's all understandable. It's I like my Noble Dark. I like the players to be able to affect change, but I like things to generally suck. And that suckage is why the players are able to change things.
That line out of context sounds hilarious.
Yeah, because we're working to improve it actively. You have to fight for it.
Yeah, I like that as a narrative.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Noble Dark.
Yeah, it is supreme
Mm-hmm.
in my mind. So, and I want to be clear. I feel like I've effectively already said this, but I do like Curseborne.
Yeah, I think we all have agreed
My
on that.
gripes are not this system is bad and you shouldn't play it for these reasons. That's not at all what I'm saying. These are just my opinions and my preferences. I'm still going to be doing stuff with Curseborne. I do love it. I think it's cool. I have these gripes because I want more for it. I want more out of it. And it's missing the things I was looking for when they were talking about the Kickstarter coming up. I was still hoping we would have more knobs and dials and such, and that hasn't. The absence of it hasn't caused me to hate it or become disillusioned by it. I'm still very much a fan. So, ratings?
Well, it's getting a place on my shelf.
Same. Can make it sound really bad, and it's getting a place on my shelf because I have no choice at this point, which is technically true, but it's not in that negative of a light. It is absolutely placed on the shelf. But I backed this bitch, so.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
As someone this is their first actual play of Storypath Ultra, and granted, this could change because what we did was we essentially played a rough draft. Shit can change.
Yeah,
I feel like
remember what I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
This is draft manuscript, but this is done. All that's coming now is errata and FAQ and stuff.
Fair.
The game is not going to dramatically transform into something else.
Well, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean like some of the gripes might like change. Like, for example, they may even out the severity of torments or what have you.
Yeah, some of that stuff may get tweaked. Yes,
that's what I mean. But like, I think this is pretty like mid shelf, just below eye level.
Okay.
It's going on my shelf, but it's not with the luxury goods.
This guy can't pick between shelf or PDF. He's got if I put it on the shelf, where's it going to go?
I want the copy. I want the copy.
Hey.
I like the system I'm a huge fan of urban fantasy, and I like the way that they did the supernaturals for the most part. I really do actually like the concepts they went for with the lineages and families. It's just the couple of things that I've encountered keep it from just like being that like 10 out of 10 primo game for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
about
will
you,
say,
Silver?
shelf's a shelf.
That's fair.
It's,
I think
yeah,
I'm in the
true.
same spot. Enjoying it a whole lot, and even the things that are missing, or that we feel are missing for our tastes, there's a lot of space for it. So it's more work, but it's very much doable. Like the game doesn't feel like it's getting in the way of those things. So
Yeah.
I think
I'll
it's
say, if you're a world builder,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's good work. It's fun work. Like I like world building. It's very fun to think about and work on, for sure.
yeah, definitely. It's kind of nice because it gives you like a little bit of a framework of like, all right, well, here's how supernatural stuff works, and then you can just build from there without having to like
Yeah.
figure that out if you don't
Yeah.
want to.
So, games that are similar to recommend.
Oh, World of Darkness is an easy one.
I
Same
mean,
with
yeah,
Guardians.
obviously World of Darkness, and probably the rest of the Story Path Ultra stuff.
Yeah.
But that they're literal cousins and or brothers and
a
system wise.
particular World of Darkness game to recommend. I mean, that's kind of hard. The default would be just say Vampire the Masquerade.
I think if
that's
you want
your
to,
quintessential urban fantasy horror.
actually, I'm
I'm
going to give you
gonna
a different one for Curseborne.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. So if the part of Curseborne you're into is this kind of analog horror, creepypasta, like dealing with the outside, all that, I'm going to say Mage is what you want. Despite it
Yes.
being probably the most difficult to run and to learn. It's a very complex game system-wise, but it's really good for dealing with that kind of stuff in the World of Darkness setting because you can potentially interact with just anything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm gonna
Changeling.
go ahead and
Maybe.
say Wraith. Feels very vibe similar to this.
Yeah, Wraith
it's all
with the
about that.
asterisk of you want to dig into the emotional impact.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially of like,
Yeah.
if you want to feel like you're cursed.
It's a really underrated part of the World of Darkness system. But I think Wraith would be a good like jumping to point from this.
Yeah.
If you wanted to try something in World of Darkness.
Wraith is challenging game to play and to run. It is not
Yeah.
for the faint of heart. If you're going to play Wraith, you need to play it with a group of people who are going to take it seriously. Like take the role play very seriously because it deals
And you gotta
with a lot
trust
of heavy
them.
shit, and it is not a beer and pretzels fuck around and laugh type game. It's heavy. You can have obviously your moments of levity, but you're playing dead people who almost certainly have unfinished business and trauma, and you're also role playing somebody that is the dark part of another player's soul. Part of your experience is going to be lying and deceiving another player character as part of that player character. If you're playing how the book recommends you play anyways.
Yeah, which is at once a very cool play feature, but also something you, I would say, just really need to be playing with the right people for, and the right people for you. Someone you trust to do that, and not in a way that, if you have any particular real life traumas, you'll have to be careful with triggers and things. Like, definitely discuss all of that stuff beforehand.
Yeah, figure out if you need safety tools.
Yeah. Safety tools are always a good idea to bring up in any game.
Absolutely. But Wraith definitely underrated. Check it out. if you want to
That's what I
be
think.
the paladins in a supernatural world trying to make the world better despite the impending doom of the apocalypse, this is where some WOD people are going to be like, he's talking about werewolf. No, I'm fucking not. Gurus suck. I'm talking about mummy.
Clearly,
Double
it's
middle
changed.
fingers.
God damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, though.
That mummy's cool.
Yeah, mummy is base as hell. The rule set hasn't been updated to 20th, but with just a little bit of elbow grease, yeah,
You can
just
make it
grab the V20 core rulebook or whatever 20th anniversary edition book works for you best, and Mummy the Resurrection, and you're good to go. You can figure it out. Mummy is cool. Very cool. Very underrated.
Yeah. I think similarly, we can probably recommend pretty much any of the Onyx Path.
Chronicles of Darkness.
Yeah, Chronicles of Darkness, and then any other story path stuff. Like if you like the story path system, there's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's even more like spooky stuff too. I think, and there's that like They Came From series.
Yeah, there's the They Came From series, which is a bunch of different RPGs built on Story Path Ultra that do a series of different things. Some of them do like very sci-fi horror B movies. There's a wide variety of them. I don't even know them all. I haven't played any of them. I don't know if we're gonna play any of them on the pod. I have no idea. There are several of them though that do different things.
Say with the feature.
There is also At the Gates, which isn't out at the time of recording. The manuscript is out for people who have backed. If you pre-order, you'll also get access to the manuscript. But At the Gates is a very JRPG-inspired fantasy game using Story Path Ultra as a system, obviously.
Oh, I didn't know about
There's
that one.
also, similarly, I believe you'd be getting the manuscript because I don't think it's out yet, or maybe I'm misremembering. But The World Below is a underground fantasy setting that has subsystems for building a community, both socially and physically, like building a town and such. Underground. The entire setting is underground. There's a lot of interesting stuff. Big bug monsters and all kinds of like crazy sort of chaos rock magic. If you're familiar with Warhammer, it's kind of like Warpstone-y vibes going on. There's also, it's Story Path Ultra adjacent because it's not exactly Story Path Ultra, but it's very similar in Trinity Continuum, where you have Aberrant for superheroes, Adventure for pulp action punching Nazi fun, as well as Aeon for being psychics in the future, using your mind powers to fight against evil aliens and generally being good people.
I think if you can think of a major genre of media, like Story Path probably has you covered somewhere.
Yeah.
Some form.
Yeah. If you want to do cyberpunk, they have Anima.
Also, if you want to do MMO fantasy, also Anima.
Yes. Yeah. If you want to do Isekai, also Anima. Yeah.
They've got a
Story
lot.
Path. Story Path is a very powerful system. It can do a lot of things. I'm normally somebody who is like, hey, don't try to shove everything into one system, but man, Story Path has reach and flexibility.
I got that joke.
That's the way to put it.
I can't
Not
wait.
happy.
I'm in the middle of some calibrations.
I would like to play in that universe again, man.
Let me just figure out how I want to design my Story Path Ultra Mass Effect game. And we'll figure that out at some point.
What if I like regular Story Path better than
All
Story
I'm
Path?
saying is it sounds like Aeon can make biotics pretty well.
yes and no. We'll talk about it after we're done recruiting. But those are the big recommendations.
Yeah, I don't really have anything outside of Onyx Path, World of Darkness shit.
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain for something that is not those, but in the same vein.
I straight up looked through all of my like RPG books and I didn't find anything particular.
I have not played it, but I know Dresden Files has I think it's officially licensed tabletop RPG.
Yeah,
It's kind of old at this point.
Yeah,
okay. I've never played the Fate system, so
it's been around for a hot minute.
Okay. It is more urban fantasy. Let's see if I've got anything else in my folder.
Yeah, that's a good shout. That's a good shout.
I gotta catch up on that series. Also, if you like urban fantasy, that book series is pretty good.
They also have Scion, which is about being demigods in the modern world.
Yeah, also Story Path, I think. Well,
Yes.
Scion 2 used Story Path at least. Scion 1, I guess I think it's pre-Story Path.
Yeah, it's pre-Story Path Ultra, but it's the bones of Story Path.
It's like somewhere between the Storyteller system and the Story Path system, I think, because it was back in White Wolf days, but not in like the World of Darkness.
Well, second edition is very Story Path.
Oh, second, yeah, I meant first edition. Sorry.
Oh yeah, first edition definitely cleaves Storyteller because, oh boy, that system started going off the rails.
Yeah, well, I mean, Scion is kind of supposed to be off the rails. I'll be honest, actually, that reminded me of something I was going to bring up when we were talking about scale. Since I've played Scion before, I mean, I'm not the only one here, but we've played Scion before, getting into seeing how scale worked before I had actually played any Story Path and looking at Aberrant and like coming from Scion, where your epic attributes just give you exponentially increasing automatic successes to any roll with that attribute. I was like, oh wow, the bonuses from scale seem really like tiny in comparison. Like it doesn't seem like you're actually that much better. But then having actually played with the dice system a bit, I realized like, okay, it's not as like wacky, crazy powerful. You still have to, roll to try to succeed, but it's a lot better than I thought it would be. I mean, just the fact that if you're like, yeah, I've got like 6 enhancement right now, being able to buy like 4 or 5 stunts on one roll is really good.
Well, if your difference in scale is 3 or greater, no roll is necessary.
Oh, you can just do it. Yes. I forgot.
Your scale is so much more than whatever your target is that you just define what happens.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I think that was the reason I built my one aberrant character specifically with 4 scale or 4 mega stat in the stat that I cared about, because I was like, oh, I like being able to do that to like scale 1 is really strong.
Yeah.
But
I will say, if you like the idea of some secret government agency dealing with supernaturals to study them and contain them or what have you, Delta Green.
Delta Green, yes.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I got there.
Yeah. Exalted by its default play scenario it's not urban fantasy. It's set in a fantasy setting, but the default scenario is that you are a celestial exalted, newly re-emerging, basically. Like they haven't been a thing in a very long time, and you have become one. And the terrestrial exalted, the dragonborn, who are much more numerous and organized, have a problem with that. And if they find out, they will come for you. And early on, if you're not very powerful yet, they will beat you. So there is that element of having to keep yourself secret while having potentially extremely non-subtle powers as you try to make some kind of difference in the world for whatever it is that you care about. It's it is a White Wolf game / Onyx Path, depending on the edition. And you can definitely feel that there, since a lot of them just have that kind of element. But if that is the thing you're after, even outside of urban fantasy, I think that's a decent recommend. I'm sure our recommendations will overlap a lot between reviews, but
Yeah.
we are one play group, so it's just gonna happen.
There's only so many systems we know.
Yeah, we are only so many people.
Only so many people. There's
Yeah.
only so much time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That said, Assassins.
Oh yeah, that's another true continuing one.
That's next thing we're playing on the pod.
Mhm.
We have a very likely 2-session stint of Assassins as the lead up for, I think it's safe to announce it at this point, Trinity Continuum Aberrant.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Good times.
Is it leading up into Aberrant? Or are they like
Yes.
connected? Sounds cool.
It's going to be relevant. So yeah, if you just listen to everything we put out,
Yeah.
you'll hear it here first. I'll reiterate it at the beginning of Assassins, but Assassins is the preamble to our Aberrant game. The story that is going to be told in that little Assassin's adventure is connected to the greater meta plot that I am going to be having for our Aberrant game.
Are you against me sitting in and listening with Mike?
No, I'm not against that.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean,
So
we're going
sounds
to be
fun.
publishing it anyway.
Yeah, but I have to wait.
Yeah. You could sit in, listen to it silently, and listen to the pod when it releases.
Yeah.
Yes.
You sit there and be like, what did he mean when this NPC said that line? It's
Like-
got to mean something.
Yeah, and then later after we played some Aberrant sessions, I go back and listen to it. And I'm like, oh, that's the thing.
It's the thing. But I think with that, unless there's any other final words people want to give out, anything else, I think that about does it.
No,
I
yeah.
think so. I think we did the thing. Look
Thank
at that.
you for
We
joining
took,
us.
That was
took
pretty cool.
like 2 and some almost 3 hours talking about a game we like.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
We live in a society.
Yeah. How long was that review for the other rules light system?
we're fucking 3.5 hours. Daggerheart was a long one.
Yeah.
I had a lot of thoughts and feelings.
A lot of feelings.
We had a lot of hopes that were dashed, I think is a fair way to put it.
If you want to know more about that, go listen to that because it's
Yeah.
already out.
It's true.
But I want to thank everybody for joining us and hope you have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.